Well, let's get talking about the philosophy of education in Montessori schools.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. My website is Montessorifamilies, plural.com, and my book is called The Montessori Home and Beyond. So my perspective in the book is really for parents. It's for parents to understand the Montessori principles, which I think are life-changing. And I have 6 children of my own, and we knew about the Montessori principles and kind of, had them as highlights in our life. I now have 11 grandchildren, and I've worked in Montessori schools for 20 years. So after using Montessori and doing it and seeing it for all those years, I really realized that there were elements that parents needed to know about that they could start using even literally before baby is born, because I believe that they impact the home so much. You talked about presence. To me, that's like the very first thing, learning to be present with your child, even in the womb, or even with yourself, learning to be present in the moment and kind of creating that as a lifestyle. And I believe that Montessori promoted that, present and respectful. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit into the philosophy, but I just realized early on that there was such a rich culture in this philosophy that I thought everyone should know about it. There are books coming out now about Montessori for adults, but I wanted to kind of pinpoint families because, of course, it's our youth that are going to lead us into the new future. And we want homes and families where they can grow up feeling whole and healthy mentally and in every way.
The holistic aspect of Montessori school and the philosophy behind it is a little bit different, or it seems quite different from public education, where you have I'll say, a set of regimented skills that you have to learn and you have to go through. And it's not about giving the individual the opportunity to learn at their pace. Can you Can you explain what Montessori school is to people? Because I know so many people have heard it, but they don't exactly know what it is. They go, "Oh, it's a for-profit organization."
Thank you so much for asking that question. That is like the perfect funnel to everything. I actually just did some research and discovered that research has shown now and is showing now that if a child or if a person has had at least 2 years of Montessori experience, whether at a Montessori school, some also are having developing Montessori homes now where they're homeschooling with Montessori. So 2 years of Montessori training and the outcome for happy adults is significantly higher. So if those kids were in preschool for 2 years and then grew up and, went on in their lives, they have a much better chance of being happy, well-adjusted, emotionally regulated adults, which I think is pretty amazing, pretty spectacular. And you are correct, Chuck. A lot of people have heard of Montessori schools, but not everyone really knows what they are. So, of course, they're based on Dr. Maria Montessori's principles, and she was one of the first women doctors in Italy at the time and developed her program in 1907. And she encouraged children to use hands-on materials. And I think it's amazing that she was a doctor first because she had this lucrative medical career and started working with children and realized her passion for children and left her medical career to work in the slums of Rome in a very needy area and worked with children and watched them. I would say, we talk about presence, and I think that ability to be present kind of transfers into being able to observe in detail. So she used her observation skills and observed these children to see what they really needed. And at the time, these children didn't even have parents around very much. because their parents were working and they were left alone in these apartment buildings. So she offered to take this over and start a school there. And so she observed some very difficult situations. And are you okay with me going on right now?
Yes, yes.
So she just observed the children to see what they needed. And her philosophy always was, what is the greatest thing I can do to help life in this situation? She didn't go by the curriculum of the time or a set plan. She just observed and said, "Oh, what does this child need?" Maybe they needed more nutrition or more sunlight, or maybe they needed to move their bodies with more coordination. And if that was the case, then she created exercises for them. Anyway, she made sure they got a lot of outdoor sunshine and outdoor time, that they had physical exercise, that they learned respect for other people, respect for themselves. So she required everyone in the classroom to take care of themselves and each other and materials. So I'm getting a little off course now, but just want to describe the classroom a little bit. She had child-sized furniture, materials that were their size, so their hands could use whatever they had, whether it was a lemon squeezer or a little knife that was safe for children. Whatever it was child size, so they felt comfortable and could use those things with training. She also allowed them to basically peruse her classroom and choose the things that called out to them. She talked about how the child has an inner teacher that will tell them what the next thing is. It's like kind of an intuitive sense. What do I need? Oh, I need to do these works over here, or I need to walk on a balance beam. So she felt that if they could learn to listen to that inner prompting, that they could develop themselves in a sense.
Mhm.
She believed that teachers would stand and be guides, basically, and watch the children and then help them do what they wanted to do, especially in the youngest classrooms. But there's a theme of this all the way through high school in the schools. So if you have a child that's in a public or a traditional school, and there are some public Montessoris developing, by the way, which is awesome as well. But in a traditional school, children sit at a desk, they sit at one desk. They don't really move around the classroom, um, constantly, which they can do in a Montessori classroom. And they don't sit on the floor necessarily, from what I understand, in a Montessori classroom. And I have worked in some public schools at to some degree, for not a lot, but, volunteering here and there. So I have seen, but what I see in a Montessori classroom is that they're free to move around. They're free to sit on the floor with a rug and lay out their materials, or they can go to a table. They can work by themselves, or they can work in a group. They can let people know, "I just wanna be quiet now and do this work." Or, "I'm feeling really social today. I'd really like to work with you on this. Let's get out the pink tower and build this tower of blocks?" Um, so I think that's possibly the biggest difference, those 2 things, that there's a curriculum in the public education that has to be followed for all the children, and that they can't move around as they want to. In a Montessori environment, children are free to move around and free to choose whatever they want. And they can work on those things as long as they want within reason. Of course, there's lunch times and things like that where they have to abandon their work for periods of time. But Montessori said that her greatest finding was called normalization. And normalization is simply when someone can choose something that they would love to do and are really excited about, and can do it as long as they want within reason.
Mhm.
And she said that that developed this quiet within them, kind of like a really good book that you can just read and read and read. And when you finish, you're just like, I feel so refreshed. Where did I go? I was kind of gone for a few minutes there. So that's kind of the idea with normalization, that children can listen to that inner teacher and follow and then do those things. Neuroscience is actually validating this now, that that normalization is developing, and the freedom to choose and to, use their own time, plan, all of those things, they're developing executive functioning skills, which is
Mhm.
time management, impulse control, planning, all of that, creative problem solving. It's really amazing.
I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, or anything like that, but everything that you're saying, at least for me on my end, I'm going, well, of course. But especially when you're saying in the studies that you have found, at least giving 2 years of Montessori schooling or philosophy of schooling, to me, when I hear somebody say that, you think, well, yeah, that opens up curiosity. And everybody is curious about something, but something different. And if I have my curiosity being satisfied for me to do something, that's going to make me have an interest in other things. And then I think later on in life, again, especially about the seating arrangement, because you see that you go into a public school or public anywhere. If it's the first day or first 2 days and you sit down in one place, all of a sudden, if you do a change on the third day, that person that was sitting in that chair, it's technically not assigned to them, but they get kind of upset, you know? And I've also seen in foreign countries where here in the States, if you're standing in line to read a sign or something like that, and somebody moves around or too close or just in front of you because you've left like a 10-foot gap, you think, what are they doing taking cuts in front of me? Or perhaps in Italy and France, if you leave that gap, that's a welcome sign to step in front to look at whatever it is that you're viewing. All these things, I think, if you do it at an early age and get them used to certain things, I think what you're getting at too, you become more adjusted, well-adjusted humans and adults in later life. Am I
Exactly.
stretching?
No, no, exactly. She also something that relates to what you're saying is she talks about the 0 to 6-year-old time of the absorbent mind. And now I think neuroscience is validating that children live in their right brain in the first 6 years till the left brain starts integrating. And it's exactly what you're talking about, that especially during that time, children are so malleable and they're developing all aspects of their brain and their being, right? And kinda anchoring themselves and their personalities. So exactly. And the earlier we do it, the better, she said, that we get them used to flexibility and respect and flow, right? Can I share one other thought that came?
Yes, yes, this is really interesting, please.
The other aspect that I think is really crucial to understand in a Montessori environment is as a medical doctor and as a scientist, Montessori had a very scientific approach to life. And she said it was very important that the environment be orderly. So she set things up in a very structured way, which is interesting, the idea of giving children total free flow, but she had a very structured approach to how she set up the environment. So she had low shelves for the children at their height so that they could reach everything and only enough materials out so that things felt organized and beautiful and simple. She didn't allow clutter in the classroom. She didn't have toy boxes with 100 things thrown in, which is easier for parents sometimes, but it doesn't build the structure of the scientific mind. And as I've been in Montessori for almost 30 years, and it was just recently that I realized that what she was doing was actually creating a scientific mind in these children. I want to tell you a story, if I may. My daughter has identical triplet boys. They're 2 years old. And
Wow.
so I've been using a lot of my skills with, which has been so fun. Anyway, we set up the environment as they were getting older so they could interact with their environment, choose materials. And when in a Montessori environment, children are encouraged to choose a material from the shelf that they want and either lay out a rug on the floor to do those materials or to sit at a table and do it. And then when they're finished, they put it back. And they're encouraged to have a lesson at the beginning. And that's only so that they can understand how the material works before they start doing it. It really helps them a lot. But anyway, so we have there are 5 basic areas in a Montessori environment. It's practical life, which is learning how to wash tables, comb your hair, water plants, all the physical care of self and the environment. So that's the first thing, practical life. And then sensorial, where we have a little section where they can feel different textures, different colors, all the senses. And then we have a mathematical area where they're counting, and that may be colored beads or little cubes where they're counting and they gradually build that their skills up. The other area is language, and they may have books to look at in there at first. Then they learn their sounds, their letter sounds, and their letters. And then they build those letters into words and start reading and speaking and hearing stories. The last category is called cosmic cultural, and that's basically everything else. It's music, it's art, science, botany, the study of plants, and zoology, the study of animals. So, anyway, I'm just trying to give you a visual. So, you might have one shelf for each of those categories, or you might have a whole shelf with different tiers, depending on the person who's organizing the environment. But within that environment, if something has so all these materials are on trays. So you can identify, well, this is this material, with a tray. I'm going to take this is my work right now. I'm going to take it to this rug and then I'm going to put it back when I'm done. So on those trays, if it has a lot of small pieces, we always have a container for the small pieces, like a basket or a little box or something. And then it's clear which pieces go with what materials, right? So last Christmas, the triplets were 18 months old. And one of them Cruz noticed, I guess, that we had these little containers holding the small parts. My daughter got a beautiful felt Christmas tree from someone that she hung on the wall, and it had all these little stick on ornaments, Velcro. And so she put it on the wall, and they put all the ornaments on, and, they let the children play with it. And after a while, I went over there and I noticed this beautiful Christmas tree on the wall. And suddenly I noticed that Cruz, at 18 months old, not even 2 yet, got a little box and brought it over and put it under the Christmas tree and gathered all the ornaments and put them in that little box. It's like his mind was already in my perspective, my observation, his mind was already intuiting the order that we had put into this Montessori environment. And he found it on his own to go get a box, put it under this little felt Christmas tree, and gather the ornaments so they weren't all over the place. And I just thought that was mind blowing to me that
Yeah.
even before 2, he was doing that. So that's
You
one
know,
element.
it's as you were saying, it's in Montessori school, you have the freedom of choice, it sounds like, to do. However, to me as well, it's in a structured organization that you have the freedom to do, which again, I think about what I see in young adults these days is I'm going to get in trouble by saying they cannot function in an organized anything. They are so about independence. I had a conversation with somebody and, they said, I don't like to do whatever somebody is telling me to do. And I don't like to do this and that. And I said, well, you have to work within a structure. You're in society. I don't have to if I don't want to. And I hear and I see a lot of that with late teens, early 20 kids right now is, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not what I want to do. So I think with the Montessori, it also teaches them how to work within um, an organization. So, okay. I wasn't sure if I was right or wrong.
That's right. That's right. And to be respectful of the order that's
Yeah.
established there and of other people. In fact, when the children are working on their materials and when they're in the classroom, they can choose anything and do anything as long as it doesn't interfere with someone else's working as long as it doesn't hurt themselves or the environment. They have to take care of the materials. They can't throw them across the room or smash them, whatever. They have to respect them. Otherwise, the material goes away for a while. It's just consequence.
For all the things that young adults, young people are doing now is, the lashing out or breaking or throwing things. Again, this is just within what I see and hear. So I'm not saying all, but that's what I hear and see often. You even hear this in the news. Just
Mhm.
recently, 6-year-old brings a gun and shoots a teacher. No, why? Well, because they haven't been taught critical
Exactly.
thinking, they haven't been taught order, and it's almost like giving a child a choice of order, but you have to guide them and help them along, I think, and that seems like what the Montessori school does. Here are the tools,
Yes.
and I'm here to help you, guide you, but you can use those tools and build something. Use your mind or something. I know I'm just talking and stretching, but it just seems like this is a
No, you're right on completely. And Montessori also said that maybe I said this before, but she said that her greatest purpose was to draw out of the child what was already in there. Again, rather than this curriculum. There is a Montessori curriculum, but it's kind of overreaching and it's very flexible when we bring in what. And and the classrooms are arranged with 3-year periods. So we have 2.5 to 6-year-olds in one classroom. So they are always either being mentored by older children, watching, or they are then mentoring. And it's a really nice thing for them to learn that flow and to realize that in all everyday life, all of life, like what you're doing, we're always learning from someone or mentoring someone else, right? We're always sharing. There's always going to be somebody above us. And I'm not saying above, but someone who knows more and someone who knows less, right? One thing I love in the Montessori class, it's one of my favorite things. And I actually started trying to do this with my 2-year-old grandsons just a couple weeks ago. It's called the silence game where we meet on a circle on the floor, and usually there is actually a circle, either a circle rug or a piece of tape circling, so everyone is equal, and everyone is together. And the person who leads it, the teacher or the guide or the parent, says, "Okay, excuse me. So now we're going to play the science silence. Let's see how long we can be silent." So then she just uses her hands, and everyone's watching to see who's gonna break the silence. And with those 2-year-old boys, it was like 7 seconds before they said anything, and I was actually astounded. Wow, they knew what we were doing and they were trying, but I've done minutes with elementary kids, and that's a long time too.
I'm gonna reach on all this stuff with the philosophy, but that sounds like a good way to be able to teach somebody that's young and growing up that you could be silent and present around people instead of isolating yourself, which I think a lot of young people nowadays and people in general will do. They will isolate. They cannot be silent around people and are distracted. So I don't know. That's to me, that seems like doing that at an early age will teach me later on that I'm
Yeah,
present here,
absolutely.
but I can be in my own zone, so to speak.
Exactly, exactly, and I could be respecting you as I'm respecting myself too, that we both need to be respected and appreciated and loved and empowered, right? Kinda going along with what you're saying again, I believe there's work for the adult to do in the environment, which is keeping the environment really clean and organized and simple, right? So like depending on the adult and the environment, we're changing materials every week to every month, depending, probably, gradually through a month at least. And then we're changing materials so that different elements of the brain are tapped. What else is available? Are we gonna work with bolts and screws today? Are we going to do color tablets where we take all the pinks and line them up by shades, thinking about, oh, what's darker, what's lighter? Or are we scrubbing tables? What calls out to me today? And to me, that really thrills me to think about. And there, like I said, there is a curriculum. So there is a process for the adult to kind of grasp in order to make the best use of that environment for the children. But it's joyful, it's joyous, and when I went through the Montessori training in my probably early 30s, actually, I felt like I was being born again. I was so excited, and she uses wooden geography puzzles for each of the continents first, and then the countries, you can actually lift out each country in every continent. And if you ask a 6-year-old Montessori child, they can tell you all the continents and all the oceans. And it's amazing. And they do it with fun and joy and songs. And it's just wonderful. They study the different cultures of the world. They have guests come in and play music and bring food. It's just a wonderful culture. And having said that, too, in my book, the last chapter in my book is about using traditions to celebrate life. And if you have a family, which my book is basically written for, you can celebrate these traditions and rituals with your children and empower them to participate. They can help plan if we want to celebrate Hanukkah or we want to celebrate Kwanzaa or Christmas or um, whatever, Diwali. Your children can say, "Well, I would like to have some lights, or I'd like to have candles, or can we make a cake? Can we have grandma and grandpa come? Can we have our friends come? Can we read a book so we understand what Diwali is all about? Can we have a circle for our cousins so they understand why we celebrate the Festival of Lights? And can we go to someone else's house?" So I'm going on and on, but it's so rich how Montessori encourage people to celebrate those traditions. And I think from research that I've done, it creates a deeper sense of bonding in the family. Children feel a part of something, they feel they belong to something. They learn about their history and their culture, and they create deeper connections with their family members. They also learn to cook. Maybe they're going to make Christmas cookies or whatever that is. They learn to bake. And anyway, I could go on and on, but it's so rich. Thank you for asking that question. Actually, I embrace some of the things that are not necessarily Montessori norms in my book. I talk about right brain learning, which is about the right brain. Montessori, as a norm, doesn't talk about that or embrace it. But I believe that Montessori, as a scientist, would want to know about the right brain, would want to know that the brain starts to develop from the right side and doesn't actually integrate with the more critical, logical left brain until about age 6. So that means that the child lives in a right brain for almost 6 years, depending on the child. They might, develop that connection earlier or later, like Einstein. Supposedly, he didn't enter into his left brain till he was 9, but that gave him full access of the right creative mind for 9 years, and no wonder he brought forth so many intuitive, creative, visionary understandings, right? I hope I answered your question. The other part of the beyond is in right brain, and thank you for asking. In right brain, they say that anyone can develop their right brain. There are actually right brain activities. Rightbrainkids.org .com is a wonderful site to go to. It's just amazing what they have integrated a lot of the Baroque music and things that help the brain to develop. But anyone who develops their right brain can take in information all at once. The right brain just takes in information and intuitively understands what to do, where the left brain has to see things one data point at a time. It has to meditate on this before they can kind of grasp it. But the right brain just gets it. And that's why it's so important to understand this right brain and nurture it in your children before age 6. And because then they've got that when they go into a more linear approach to life. And can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah, yes.
I just don't wanna take over your old show, but I'm just excited about these concepts because when my children were young, I learned about the right brain in an indirect way. I learned about doing flashcards with babies. Glenn Dolman was probably one of the first pioneers, and Makoto Shishida from Japan talked about the magical right brain of the infant, where research has found now that they're actually calculating in their first year of life. And using flashcards doesn't have to be a lot, 3 or 4, 5 minutes a day actually stimulates the visionary process of the right brain. They take in information in a millisecond. So you don't have to do a lot, but it stimulates their learning. And you can use beautiful images of nature, flowers, the perfect symmetry of a leaf that grows and how the veins are so perfect. And there's just so much symmetry in nature. It's kind of my go to. I love to give my grandchildren lots of pictures of nature and tell them what those are because the words leaf veins is a point of information, right? And it's stimulating their minds. So they're seeing this beautiful image. They're hearing what the word is. And then we're going out for a walk and we're collecting beautiful fall leaves and we're making beautiful artwork with it. And it's just so holistic. And that's what Montessori is to me. So it's the right brain that's not necessarily talked about a lot in Montessori. It's flashcards, Glendoman, Shishida, and rightbrainkids.com is what's different about my book.
Everything that you're saying makes me believe and understand a little bit better, but especially about the creativity is the right brain. Now that you're talking about that, what I'm getting at is, you're using flashcards and you're using words to associate with. And I look at it as if I was to do that, or if that was done to me, then I go out for a walk with mom and dad or whoever, or on a little field trip. I kind of instinctively, without somebody telling me, looking for those things. What is it that I just saw? But I'm instinctively doing it because it raised my curiosity. And I think that's where, as a child, at least for me, I'm thinking there's that creative part that's blending, the right and left brains are blending together now.
I
And
love it.
I think as far as people when they're older and they want to try to develop that right brain, the creative side again, because you hear a lot of adults say, I lost my creative side, I lost creativity. Painting, more painting than less drawing, but the painting, I think, really can help open that up and unlock it again. You just have to be able to allow yourself to allow the colors to flow and mix together, and something will come of it. Don't try to make specific geometric shapes or draw a face. Just let it go. And I think that's how that creativity begins again. Allows you to mix the colors, allows you to do whatever you want. Again, that's just me throwing that out there because that's what I did.
No, that's absolutely right, and that's the whole idea of choice. It allows it to come from within you and to go out to your work and your expression. What connects with that also is Montessori talked about how when you give children understanding of what are these different kinds of trees like you're talking about. Oh, that's a fir tree and that's a spruce and that's a maple and a cedar, and a hemlock. They're actually creating relationships with those trees then. They're identifying, wow, a hemlock has a little leader at the top where the top of the tree always falls over a little bit. That's unique to the hemlock tree. And maple leaves in the fall have the most gorgeous colors. So Montessori curriculum addresses all the different parts of life, trees, people, physical building structure, I mean, languages, history, the needs of man. What are the basic needs of man for shelter, food, clothing, ritual, community, all those things. It's just her mind was just amazing. She was just such a scientist. And then she also saw that, like you're saying, she also saw that creativity is a vital part of who we are and to be whole we have to be able to tap that creativity. We have to be able to get into that zone of flow in order to be whole. Like you're saying that those adults are feeling somehow a lack because they don't have that. I love that you brought that up.
Thanks. Well, Teresa, before we close out, I want to remind folks again that your book is called Montessori Home and Beyond, correct? And your
Mhm.
website is montessorifamilies.com, where they could go and get more information about you, about the philosophy of Montessori, and also the doctor who kind of came up with all this. It's Montessori school. But I want to ask you this last question, and this is probably going to be your opinion, but you might know for a fact. Where is Montessori school headed in the future? What's going on? Because it seems like right
Mm.
now there's this big possible shift of, I'll call it regular education. Since with the administration making changes and cutting certain things, and people are worried about this and that, where is Montessori school going?
Well, that's a fascinating question, Chuck. I don't know that I can answer it, but I could give you my thoughts. I know that there are Montessori public schools. My granddaughter goes to one, but there are not many. They're very far and few between. I do know that RFK Jr. did approach a Montessori school in Florida that has a whole green program. They grow their own food. They use it in their lunches and they have a model school. I think that the government is out looking at these schools and hoping to find something that possibly they can incorporate into the public structure. I don't really know where it's going. I hope that is the case. I hope that we can not do away with our public schools, but actually infuse them with a new way of life, right? And I also hope that I know I'm going on, but I
Mhm.
also hope that families can be more integrated in the schools, where right now it's pretty much drop them off and then meet with us at conference time, twice a year.
Mhm.
Don't be around. Don't ask too many questions. And of course, that totally depends on the teacher. And I'm not against public schools or public teachers. I've seen some magnificent public schools and public teachers, but
Yeah. That there are, yeah, we can't say that all are bad or all are good. There are,
right.
there are good and bad. And my last thought on this is I hope it goes, like you're saying, that direction for the Montessori schools, that there's some sort of blend, and which makes me think about when I was in school in junior high, high school, we had such a thing as there was a trade school, which we got away from. And that's very similar, I think, as far as it's almost in reverse. You know, trade school, you're allowed to pick what you want to do and you're going to build those skills. Montessori, when you're a young age, you're allowed
Yeah.
to what you want to do and get those skills and learn to live in life. So I just hope for the little bit older kids, junior high, high school, that there's really a focus again on trade school.
Me too. In fact, I've been talking with a lot of people about that, and I agree. I hope that and I have seen and heard that some of the high schools are reconsidering bringing those things back in. So I agree. And even in elementary, why can't we have wood shop in elementary or even preschool? Montessori schools do have little carpentry areas. And of
Wow.
course, you have to be very careful and only have certain tools. And even in the preschool and Montessori classrooms that I've been in where they have had carpentry, the children learn how to use the materials. And again, if they're not using them correctly, they disappear for a little while,
Mm,
not with angry words, but they just disappear.
yeah.
So they learn to respect them and use them carefully so they can do more because of that.
Well, Teresa, this has been a great conversation. So thank you very much for all the information.
Thank you. It was just delightful. I really appreciated it.